Hi everyone, it's John Velasco for PhoneArena.com, and today I'm doing an in-depth video review of the HTC DROID Incredible 2, which is the follow-up to last year's model. It's available right now. You can pick it up for $200 on contract, and it has some upgraded specs compared to the previous model. It definitely has some resemblance to the HTC Incredible S overseas. Luckily though, the DROID Incredible 2 is a global phone, so you'll be able to use it here in the US and also abroad. So if you've checked out our HTC Incredible S review, you'll notice that the DROID Incredible 2 is the same exact thing in terms of design. It's a little bit larger than its predecessor, just because it boasts a much larger display. Overall, it's manageable to hold in the hand, a lot better than the HTC ThunderBolt or even the Samsung DROID Charge, which we just checked out. It has the same soft touch coating material on the back and on sides, which gives it a nice clean look all around, and it utilizes the same patterned contour design to give it some distinguishable traits. We're greeted with a larger 4-inch Super LCD display, and it has a resolution of 480 by 800, so that's WVGA. When you combine that with the size of the screen, it makes for some crisp-looking visuals. Even tiniest of text is not a problem. It has some very sharp corners to it. And on top of that, the color production is pretty magnificent. It's very natural. It doesn't seem overly saturated as well, so we definitely like that aspect. On top of that, when we use it in outdoor conditions, it's pretty easy to view still, just because the viewing angles are superb with it. Above the display, you have a wide grill for its earpiece. There's also an LED right there for your notifications. And on top here, you also have the 1.3 megapixel front-facing camera for video chats and self-portraits. Yet another distinguishable trait with the HTC DROID Incredible 2 is its Android buttons. You can tell that they're placed close towards the edge, so there's a little bit of tendency of actually accidentally pressing them. But the unique thing is that if you tilt it to landscape, they'll automatically rotate. On the left side of the phone, we have the micro USB port for charging and data connection, and we also have the thin-looking volume rocker. Although it does look flush, there's a reasonable amount of feedback when you press it down. Meanwhile, we find the 3.5mm headset jack on the top side of the phone. You have one of the microphones right here. You also have the dedicated power button. It looks recessed, but it still exhibits a nice response when you press it down. And finally, on the back, we have the 8-megapixel autofocus camera with dual LED flash. You have the speakerphone grill right there. And on the bottom edge, you have the microphone. This notch here, you could remove the back cover. And from there, you get access to its battery. Underneath it is the SIM card slot, since the device is a world phone. And it comes preloaded with a 16GB micro SD card. Even though the HTC DROID Incredible 2 is in a dual-core handset, the Qualcomm MSM8265 Snapdragon processor inside of there, clocked at 1 GHz with 768 MB of RAM, does a great job as far as navigating and operating the handset. You can tell here just by quickly navigating across the home screen, it's not having any problems, and overall, it does a pretty good job as far as opening and closing apps and maintaining a reasonable amount of speed. Even though the HTC DROID Incredible 2 isn't featuring the latest version of the Android platform or the Sense UI, you're still greeted with a nice experience. It's Android 2.2 Froyo running with the Sense UI. It's not the latest one that we see on devices like the HTC Sensation or the HTC Evo 3D that's coming up, but still there's plenty of personalization to be found with it. You can tell there's a bunch of different useful widgets, icons that give you a lot of information directly on the home screen. On top of that, you have the helicopter view. You could do a pinch gesture and it gives you all 7 home screens at once, and you could jump into any one of them really quickly. And even more, if you click the paintbrush icon in the bottom right corner here, it gives you different options for scene modes, which basically are preloaded themes for the handset. Thanks to its larger display over its predecessor, the messaging experience with the HTC DROID Incredible 2 is pretty fantastic, especially with the Sense keyboard. It's quite functional and responsive here. Very useful too, just because it implements some numbers and even some punctuations directly on the main layout, rather than having to switch to a secondary view here. Now, even though the portrait option might look a little bit on the cramped side, when you tilt it to landscape, it gives you a lot more room for your fingers, and the overall typing experience is pretty quick and easy. Much like other Android handsets out there, the HTC DROID Incredible 2 offers a phenomenal Gmail experience. You have all the rich features that you'd commonly expect, such as threaded view and even the ability to label stuff. On top of that, email setup is pretty easy too. If you don't use Gmail, you could use other options as well. Just simply provide your username and password, and 9 to 10 times it'll automatically set up. Thankfully, we're presented with an exceptional web browsing experience with HTC DROID Incredible 2. It's able to give you that desktop-like experience. It managed to load our website here fairly quickly, and you have features like double tap to automatically resize the layout. You also have multi-touch gesture support to zoom in, and you can tell the kinetic scrolling is very smooth and quick, so it's very responsive. On top of that, it has support for Flash, so you'll be able to interact with content. Just like the Incredible S, we find the same exact music player interface employed by the HTC DROID Incredible 2. Now, the thing that we like about it is that it has this nifty looking 3D cover flow effect to it when you're browsing music. It's actually better when you tilt it to landscape just because the movement's a little bit more fluid and just gives you some eye-catching visuals with it. In terms of the audio quality with its speaker, it's kind of muted. It's not as strong as we'd like. It doesn't crackle though. There is an SRS enhancement, but it still doesn't have the powerful tones we'd like. When it comes to watching videos on the HTC DROID Incredible 2, it's pretty good just because the frame rate is pretty steady. The video we have here is encoded in DivX 1280 by 720 resolution. There's a good amount of detail to it. Colors pop out. And on top of that, the fluid rate that it plays is just exceptional. Honestly, we don't notice any improvements with the handset's 8-megapixel autofocus camera versus what we saw with the Incredible S a month ago. In fact, outdoor shots in good lighting produces some muddy visuals. It has a tendency to be a little bit on the overexposed side, while low lighting shots tend to be a little bit grainy as well. Fortunately, though, the LED flash does a decent job of illuminating the scenery, and overall, the images should be passable for most people, but they're not really that breathtaking. Much like other high-end smartphones out there, you've got 720p video recording on board. Quality is average at best. It has a tendency to look a little bit grainy, especially in outdoor conditions. It has this jittery recording to it, so it's not as smooth as we'd like, and lacks continuous focus, but fortunately you have touch focus, so you could touch anywhere in the screen to refocus it. Audio recording slightly improved versus the Incredible S, just because it doesn't have as much distortion. Verizon throws in a lot of their apps on the device here, and we'll quickly just mention them. You got 3G mobile hotspot, so you could use it as a wireless modem for other devices. You have things like My Verizon Mobile, NFL Mobile. You also have a lot of VCast branded apps, such as the VCast Media, VCast Apps, Music, Tones, Videos, and you also have VZ Navigator on board. Sadly, though, we're not that impressed with the Incredible 2's lack of maintaining a solid signal strength. You can tell here we're in a high coverage area, we're getting a low amount of bars, and it does fluctuate heavily. The earpiece might not be capable of producing the most blasting of tones, but still nonetheless reasonable with its output. As far as audio quality is concerned, on both ends of the line, it's still quite audible, but there is a little bit of a hollowness to voices. When we switch to the speakerphone, on the highest volume setting, there's a noticeable amount of crackling going on, but overall, the output is kind of muted. Compared to some of Verizon's LTE-enabled phones, battery life with the HTC DROID Incredible 2 is pretty decent just because we managed to get a solid day of normal usage on a full charge, meaning for heavy users you could get by a solid 8-hour work shift without having to constantly charge the device at any given time. For starters, the HTC DROID Incredible 2 is a nice phone indeed. It operates well, you get all the features of Android, and it has a beautiful display, good battery life. Photos are on the average side, but when you compare it to the competition right now, it's kind of lacking in terms of features and hardware. If this device were released earlier in the year, it might have gotten some headway just because right now it's following up after the HTC ThunderBolt, and when it's missing things like LTE support or even a dual-core processor, compared to the competition out there, it's starting to look a little bit dated. So if you'd like to learn more about the HTC DROID Incredible 2 or for all latest cell phone reviews, news, specs, and information, you can check us out, PhoneArena.com.